This has been really great coming here today. My roots are kind of in permaculture. Permaculture rewired my brain in 1992, and then David Holmgren's book did it again in 2004. And since then, my life has really been about the question about how do we scale this stuff up? How do we take those design principles and get them everywhere as quickly as possible? Because in 2004, my sense was that permaculture as a movement wasn't doing it quickly enough. So transition was kind of designed as a sort of Trojan horse that you could stuff it in and wheel past everyone and they'd go, oh, it's transition. And it could sort of get into places that permaculture wasn't getting into at the time. My talk was really about a piece of work I'm doing at the moment, which is called 21 Transition Stories for COP21. So we've looked at 21 very different stories from around the world of people doing transition and sort of drawing out from that some insights that might be useful to the conversations in permaculture about how we go to scale quickly.
Fantastic.
One of my favourite quotes was a French artist, Jean Dubuffet, who said, art's best moments are when it forgets what it's called. Art doesn't lie down in a bed that's made for it. Its best moments are when it forgets what it's called. And for me, actually, permaculture's best moments are when we don't call it permaculture very often. And the same with often with transition. I'm not precious about whether things are called transition or not. It really doesn't matter. Some groups don't call themselves it. Some groups do call themselves it. And there are times when it's really powerful to do that. And I think some of the stuff that transition has been doing in terms of really focusing on needs. So in permaculture we talk about needs, we're designing for needs, but actually what are the needs of the place where we live? Is it for borage? It's often not for borage, Is it for actually, affordable housing? Is it for jobs? Is it livelihood creation? Is it for addressing healthcare in a different way? Those are the kind of ways in. Is it for, giving young people something to do, some hope, some activity? And actually there's some really interesting projects in transition, I think, where it feels to me like we're kind of going to a different scale by actually dropping the need to sort of start out by making sure everybody understands our flowchart with chickens and arrows and compost heaps and greenhouses, and actually we find a different way in. So for me, transition was something where we put permaculture principles implicitly inside it, but you didn't have to kind of explain to everybody what permaculture was before they could get involved. It's about minimizing the barriers to involvement. I think story is very powerful at making another world tangible. So, Pandora is just awesome. I think that talk she gave yesterday was just fantastic. And again, it's about stories. It's about people's stories. When you can see people. Chris Johnson, who I think is here, he always says, all the great stories start out with something that feels impossible. Harry Potter locked in his cupboard under the stairs, someone giving Frodo a ring and saying, take out and chuck that in that mountain over there. It's really me, you're joking. But actually, when you hear the stories about people who've taken those first steps and found that actually they could actually do it, and actually I never realised I could do that, and I've learned this about myself and that about myself. So what I try and do in the work I do in transition is really storytelling. Looking for those stories around the world that you think, actually I could take that story and tell that to those people, and they'd go, wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, and so for me, one of my favourite ones is the Brixton pound £10 note with David Bowie on it. It's a local currency. It's just a banknote, but you'd be amazed. I've held that banknote up without even saying anything in talks, and it's just got a round of applause. I went to Paris recently. The mayor of this suburb of Paris came along. There were like 100 and something transition people there. I was there. He wanted his photo taken, not with me or any of the people, holding the Brixton pound note. What is that about? Every massive shift needs its banners, its flags, its icons, its stories, and the more we can generate those, the more effective we'll be, I think.